The heavy weight of the morning fog hung over the small town of Riverton as the three old friends sat at a table in the local diner. Jack, Luke, and Ben had known each other since childhood, and despite their different paths in life, they still met every few years to catch up. It was always a nostalgic ritual, full of laughter, reminiscing, and, inevitably, discussions of their past adventures. Today, however, the conversation had shifted toward something far more intriguing. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Ben?" Jack asked, eyeing his old friend across the table. "This trip is different. We've never done anything like this before." Ben leaned forward, his eyes glinting with determination. "You know me, Jack. I'm always up for a challenge, and after everything we've been through, it's time we finally see this thing through to the end." Luke, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I still don't get it. Why after all these years are we going back to the mountains? We were kids when we found the map. We didn't know what we were doing. This could be dangerous." Ben shrugged, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile. "Maybe, but that's what makes it exciting, doesn't it? The unknown, the thrill of discovering something no one else has ever seen." Jack looked at the two of them and shook his head, smiling despite himself. He knew better than anyone that once Ben had an idea, nothing could stop him. And Luke? Well, Luke was always the voice of reason, but even he couldn't resist the lure of adventure for long. The three of them had been inseparable growing up. But life had pulled them in different directions. Jack had gone into law enforcement, Luke had taken over his family's hardware store, and Ben? Ben had been the dreamer, the one always chasing after some new idea or venture. But their shared history bound them together, and whenever Ben came up with one of his great ideas, they couldn't help but follow along. It all started nearly 20 years ago, when the three friends had been exploring the woods behind their town. They had stumbled upon an old, weathered map hidden in a hollowed-out tree. The map was marked with strange symbols, leading to a place deep in the mountains, a location no one seemed to recognize. Their curiosity had gotten the best of them, and they had planned to go on an expedition to find whatever the map was pointing to. But life got in the way. Their youth faded into adulthood, and the map was forgotten, tucked away in a drawer. Until now. Ben had come across the map again during a recent move, and the memories flooded back. The old excitement, the unanswered questions. He knew that if they didn't go now, they never would. All right, Luke finally said, pushing his plate aside. "Let's say we go. How do we even begin? This map looks like it's seen better days. We'll need more than just a hunch to find our way." Ben's grin widened. "I've already thought of that. I've been in touch with an old friend, a geologist, who's been researching the area. Turns out there's a hidden valley up there, a place no one has managed to get to. And we have the map. We'll figure it out together." Jack sighed. "You always do this, Ben, but I'm in. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't see this through." Luke chuckled and leaned back in his chair. "Well, it looks like I'm outvoted. Let's just hope this time we're not chasing some wild goose." The three friends finished their meal, their minds buzzing with the excitement of the journey ahead. That afternoon they packed their gear, tents, sleeping bags, and enough food for a few days. They made their way to Ben's truck, heading for the mountains where their childhood curiosity would finally be put to the test. The drive was long and filled with silence, each man lost in his thoughts. As they neared the base of the mountain, the mist thickened and the air grew colder. The world around them seemed to grow more ancient, as if the mountains themselves were watching them, waiting for them to uncover whatever secret they had kept hidden for so long. They arrived at the trailhead just as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape. The trail was narrow and winding, disappearing into the dense forest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. Jack pulled on his backpack, adjusting the straps. This is it. No turning back now. The trio began their ascent, the sounds of their footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath them. The path was steep, and the higher they climbed, the more treacherous it became. They crossed streams, navigated through thick brush, and climbed over rocks, all the while trying to make sense of the map. Hours passed, and the sun dipped lower, casting an orange glow over the landscape. The journey grew more difficult as they ventured deeper into the mountains, and the temperature dropped. The higher they went, the more desolate it felt. The trees grew sparse, and the ground became rocky and uneven. "We should set up camp for the night," Jack suggested, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Ben agreed, pointing to a small clearing ahead. "That looks as good a spot as any." The friends worked together, setting up their tents quickly. As night fell, they gathered around a small fire, the crackling of the flames the only sound breaking the silence of the mountain. They ate a simple dinner, their words few as they reflected on the journey so far. "I'm starting to think we're crazy," Luke said, staring into the fire. "This is insane. We could be walking in circles for all we know." Ben shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "We're not lost, Luke. We're just taking the scenic route." Jack laughed. "You always have a way of making things sound less dangerous, Ben." As the fire flickered low, the three of them sat in silence, staring at the flames. The mountain seemed to hum with energy, as if something were stirring deep within its slopes. Ben pulled out the old map and examined it under the firelight, his eyes scanning the symbols and markings once more. "I think we're close," he said after a long pause, his voice filled with a strange certainty. "We should reach the spot by morning." The night was cold, and the wind howled through the trees, but the friends settled into their tents, the anticipation of the next day keeping them awake. They drifted off to sleep, the sound of the wind and the fires crackling, the only things filling their dreams. Morning came with a chill, the air crisp and biting as the first light of dawn touched the mountain's peaks. They packed their gear, breaking camp quickly, eager to finish what they had started. The trail grew steeper, and the further they went, the more difficult it became to navigate. The landscape was desolate, the trees sparse and twisted, as if the land itself had grown weary of time. Ben led the way, studying the map with a steady gaze, while Jack and Luke followed closely behind. After hours of climbing, they reached a narrow ledge that overlooked a deep ravine. Far below, hidden by the craggy rocks, they saw it, a small valley, untouched by time, surrounded by cliffs on all sides. "There it is," Ben whispered, his voice filled with awe. "We've found it." They made their way down the narrow path, carefully picking their way along the edge of the ravine. As they descended, the valley opened up before them, revealing a small, hidden oasis. A stream ran through it, and in the distance they could see a large boulder with strange markings carved into its surface. "This is it," Luke said, his voice full of wonder. "We've actually found it." Ben nodded. "This is what we've been searching for. The McHale secret, the one our ancestors spoke of." Jack surveyed the area, his eyes narrowing as he took in every detail. "There's something here. We just have to look closely." The three of them moved forward, the weight of their discovery settling in. They had uncovered something no one had seen for generations. They had answered a question that had haunted their families for years. But even as they marveled at their find, they knew the true treasure was not the valley itself, but the journey that had led them here, a journey of friendship, adventure, and the unshakable bond they shared. The mountain had tested them, and they had emerged stronger for it. As they stood there, gazing at the valley, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden light on the land below. It was a moment they would never forget, a testament to their determination and the friendship that had stood the test of time. Nathan, Caleb, and Daniel had been best friends since childhood, united by a love for adventure and a thirst for discovery. They grew up in the small town of Red Rock, named after the massive red stone formation that towered over its outskirts. Red Rock was as mysterious as it was imposing, and legend had it that there was an ancient treasure hidden somewhere beneath it, left by a reclusive prospector named Jasper Wild, who had disappeared almost a century ago. Over the years, tales of Wild's treasure became folklore, dismissed as the idle chatter of the town's older folks. But for these three friends, the mystery of Red Rock was more than just a story. It was a challenge they had sworn to unravel one day. Now in their early 30s, each of them had been pulled in different directions by life's demands, yet they couldn't shake the allure of their childhood promise. One chilly autumn morning, Caleb brought up the idea again as they met for coffee at their favorite diner. "Boys," he began, his eyes glinting with the excitement they remembered from their youth. "Let's find that treasure. If we don't do it now, we might never get the chance." Nathan, a firefighter who'd always been the practical one, chuckled. "Seriously, Caleb? We spent half our childhoods looking for that thing and never even found a clue. What makes you think it's even real?" Daniel, who ran the town's small history museum, leaned forward with a serious expression. "Actually, I've been doing some research. There's a strong chance it's real. Old town records show Jasper Wild bought significant amounts of gold just before he disappeared. No one knows what happened to it or to him. It's as if he just vanished into thin air." The fire rekindled in Nathan's eyes as he glanced between his friends. "All right, one last adventure. Let's see what we can find." The three spent the next week preparing for their expedition. Caleb, a skilled mechanic, tuned up his old Jeep and loaded it with supplies: rope, pickaxes, flashlights, food, and camping gear. Daniel pored over old maps and historical documents, hoping to find something overlooked by the countless others who had scoured the Red Rock area. Finally, Nathan gathered emergency equipment, knowing that the terrain could be rough and that safety was paramount. Early Saturday morning, they set off for Red Rock. As they neared the imposing stone formation, the friends grew quiet, each absorbed in his own thoughts. They parked at the base, unloaded their gear, and began their ascent. The path was rough, littered with rocks and shrubs, but they moved with determination. After an hour of climbing, Daniel stopped suddenly, examining a section of the rock face. "This doesn't look natural," he said, running his hand over the stone. Caleb and Nathan joined him, inspecting the area closely. "What do you mean?" Caleb asked. "These markings. They look like they were chiseled intentionally, almost like a code," Daniel replied, pulling out a notebook filled with sketches and notes he'd taken from the town's archives. "Maybe Wild left a clue here," Nathan suggested, examining the markings more closely. "If he wanted to keep his treasure hidden, he'd probably leave signs that only he could decipher." Daniel compared the markings with the notes he had taken, muttering to himself. "These symbols are similar to the ones in his journals. He was obsessed with the number 7. There are 7 marks here, all in a row." He traced the symbols with his finger, pressing each one in order. Suddenly there was a low rumble, and a narrow crevice appeared in the rock wall, revealing a dark passage leading into the heart of Red Rock. "Whoa," Caleb breathed, staring in disbelief. "Did you just open a secret passage?" The friends exchanged glances, a mixture of excitement and nervousness in their eyes. They gathered their courage and stepped into the passage, their flashlights piercing the darkness as they ventured deeper into the unknown. The passage was narrow and damp, with strange echoes that made them feel as if they were being watched. After a few minutes they entered a small chamber, the walls adorned with more symbols and markings. In the center of the room was a stone pedestal, on top of which lay an old, dusty leather-bound book. Daniel approached it carefully, brushing off the dust. "This has to be Wild's journal. Maybe it'll lead us to the treasure." He opened the book, flipping through the pages filled with Wild's cramped handwriting. Many of the notes were ramblings about gold and the importance of preserving it for a worthy cause. Toward the back, he found a crude map showing a network of tunnels beneath Red Rock. "It looks like there's an entire maze down here," Daniel said, showing the map to Nathan and Caleb. "This has to be where he hid the treasure." With renewed excitement, the friends pressed on, following the map through the maze of tunnels. The deeper they went, the colder and damper it became. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by their flashlights, and every so often they heard the faint sound of dripping water echoing through the darkness. After what felt like hours, they reached a massive underground chamber, far larger than any of them had expected. At the center of the chamber was a stone chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. Their hearts pounded as they approached it, the air thick with anticipation. "This is it," Caleb whispered, his voice barely audible. "This has to be the treasure." Nathan knelt beside the chest and carefully lifted the lid, revealing its contents. Inside were stacks of gold bars, old coins, and an assortment of gemstones that sparkled in the dim light of their flashlights. Each piece looked untouched, preserved by the isolation of the chamber. The three friends stood in awe, the reality of their discovery sinking in. They had found Jasper Wild's treasure, the very thing they had dreamed about as children. "Can you believe it?" Daniel said, his voice choked with emotion. "We actually did it." But as they began to examine the contents of the chest, they noticed something strange. Beneath the gold bars was a folded piece of parchment, its edges brittle with age. Caleb carefully unfolded it, revealing a message written in Wild's handwriting. "To those who find this, heed my warning. Wealth brings power, but it also brings danger. Protect this treasure, or it will become your downfall." The friends exchanged uneasy glances. The warning cast a shadow over their discovery, filling them with a sense of foreboding. "What do you think he meant by that?" Caleb asked, his voice tinged with worry. Daniel shrugged. "Maybe he was just being dramatic. He was a bit of an eccentric after all." Nathan, however, couldn't shake the feeling that Wild's warning was more than just the ramblings of a paranoid prospector. "We should be careful. Let's take only a small amount for now, just enough to get an appraisal. We can always come back for the rest." The others agreed, and they each took a single gold bar, tucking it carefully into their backpacks. They left the rest of the treasure undisturbed, planning to return once they had a better idea of what they were dealing with. As they made their way back through the tunnels, a strange feeling of unease settled over them. The shadows seemed to grow darker, and the air grew colder. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. When they finally emerged from the passageway and stepped into the daylight, they breathed a collective sigh of relief. The open sky and fresh air felt like a balm, washing away the oppressive atmosphere of the underground chamber. Over the next few days, they discreetly had the gold bar appraised, confirming that it was authentic and worth a substantial amount. But as they discussed what to do next, they couldn't ignore the lingering unease Wild's warning had left them with. The treasure had been a part of their lives for so long, and now that they had found it, they couldn't ignore the responsibility that came with it. They agreed to leave the rest of the treasure where it was, deciding that some things were better left undisturbed. Over the years, their bond grew stronger, forged by the secret they shared. The treasure remained hidden beneath red rock, a testament to the enduring power of friendship and the importance of heeding wisdom from the past. As they grew older, each man found satisfaction in the life he had chosen. They knew that the true treasure wasn't the gold or the gemstones, it was the adventure, the memories, and the bond they had shared throughout their lives. Red Rock's mystery would live on, just as they had always hoped, a secret treasure that only they had been brave enough to discover.